People notice you more than you think. Not when you speak the loudest. Not when you try to impress them. But in the quiet moments, when you think no one is watching. There was a man who used to feel invisible. He would walk into rooms and nothing changed. Conversations continued. No one turned their head. No one cared. So he tried harder. He spoke more, laughed louder, forced his presence into every space he entered. But something strange happened. The more he tried to be noticed, the less people respected him. One day, he stopped trying. He walked into a room and said nothing. He observed. He listened. He spoke only when necessary. And slowly, things changed. People began to notice him. Not because he demanded attention, but because he no longer needed it. There was a man who was constantly disrespected. Small comments. Subtle jokes. People interrupting him mid-sentence. He tolerated it. He laughed it off. He didn't want conflict. But over time, the disrespect grew. One evening, someone crossed the line again. This time, he didn't laugh. He looked at them, calm, steady, and said, "That doesn't work for me." No anger. No shouting. Just clarity. The room shifted. Because in that moment, people realized something. He had boundaries. And people notice the moment you decide to respect yourself. A man woke up every day before sunrise. No audience. No applause. While others slept, he trained his body. While others scrolled, he trained his mind. Months passed. No one noticed. But then something changed. His posture improved. His focus sharpened. His presence became heavier, stronger, quieter. People started asking questions. "What are you doing differently?" But they didn't see the early mornings. They didn't see the discipline. They only saw the result. And people always notice the result, even when they ignore the process. There was a man who reacted to everything. Every insult needed a response. Every disagreement became an argument. He thought this made him strong. But it only made him predictable. One day, someone insulted him in public. Everyone watched, waiting. But he said nothing. He looked at the person, paused, and walked away. That silence was louder than any argument. Because people expect reactions. They expect emotion. But when you give them calm, control, restraint, they don't know how to respond. And that uncertainty makes them pay attention. A man used to explain himself to everyone. Why he made certain choices. Why he lived the way he did. He wanted to be understood. But the more he explained, the less people valued his words. Then he stopped. He made decisions quietly. He moved without announcements. He let his actions speak. At first, people questioned him. Then they watched him. Because when you stop explaining yourself, people start trying to figure you out. And curiosity creates attention. There was a man who said yes to everything. Every favor. Every request. He wanted to be helpful. Needed. Liked. But slowly, people began to take advantage of him. They expected his time. They assumed his availability. He became ordinary. Then one day, he started saying no. Not rudely. Not aggressively. Just, clearly. "I can't do that." At first, people were surprised. But then something changed. They respected his time. Because people notice when you value yourself enough to set limits. A man entered a room full of noise. Everyone was talking, competing, trying to be heard. He didn't join the noise. He stood still. Observed. When he finally spoke, it was simple. Direct. And everyone listened. Because when your words are rare, they carry weight. And people notice the one who doesn't waste them. There was a man who blamed everything. His situation. Other people. Bad luck. Nothing was ever his responsibility. People listened at first. But over time, they stopped taking him seriously. Then there was another man. Same struggles. Same obstacles. But he took responsibility. Quietly. He worked on himself instead of complaining. Months later, the difference was clear. One stayed stuck. The other moved forward. People notice accountability. Because it's rare. A man walked with his head down. Shoulders slouched. Steps uncertain. People barely acknowledged him. Then one day, he made a small change. He stood straighter. Walked slower. Looked ahead. Nothing else changed. But suddenly, people treated him differently. Because before you speak, your body speaks for you. And people notice confidence, even when it's silent. There was a man who stayed in places where he wasn't valued. Friendships that drained him. Environments that limited him. He stayed because it was comfortable. Familiar. But over time it showed. His energy dropped. His presence weakened. Then he left. No announcement. No drama. Just distance. And something shifted. He became lighter. Stronger. Clearer. And the people who once ignored him began to notice his absence. Because people often notice you more when you're gone. A man tried to be liked by everyone. He agreed with everything. Avoided conflict. But people didn't respect him. Because he stood for nothing. Then he changed. He spoke honestly. Disagreed when necessary. Some people left. But those who stayed respected him more. Because people notice authenticity. Even when it's uncomfortable. There was a man who chased quick results. He wanted success immediately. When it didn't come, he quit. Again and again. Then there was another man. He stayed consistent. Even when nothing seemed to happen. Even when progress was slow. Months later, he had results. Years later, he had mastery. People notice patience. Because most people don't have it. A man kept his environment messy. His space was chaotic. Unorganized. And so was his mind. He struggled to focus. To think clearly. One day, he cleaned his desk. Just his desk. But that small action created momentum. His space improved. His thinking improved. And gradually, his life improved. People noticed his clarity. Because order on the outside reflects order within. There was a man who talked about his goals constantly. What he would do. What he would become. But nothing changed. Then he stopped talking. He started working. Quietly. Months passed. People stopped hearing about his goals. And started seeing his results. Because people don't notice what you say. They notice what you do. A man stayed calm under pressure. While others panicked, he focused. While others complained, he worked. At the end, his results stood out. Not because he was the most talented, but because he was the most controlled. People notice how you act when things go wrong. Because pressure reveals who you are. There was a man who didn't chase attention. He didn't try to impress. He simply improved himself, daily. His habits were strong. His standards were high. And over time, people started noticing him. Because when you build yourself, attention follows. Not instantly, but inevitably. A man refused to lower his standards. Even when it was easier. Even when others did. At first, people mocked him. But later, they relied on him. Because consistency and standards create trust. And people notice who they can depend on. There was a man who revealed everything about himself. Every thought. Every plan. People listened, then lost interest. Then he changed. He became more reserved. More selective. He didn't hide, he just didn't overshare. And suddenly, people became curious. Because mystery creates attention. A man trained himself to stay silent. Not out of fear, but out of control. He listened more than he spoke. Observed more than he reacted. And when he finally spoke, people listened. Because silence, when chosen, is power. There was a man who built his life quietly. No announcements. No showing off. Just consistent effort. Years passed. Then one day, everything changed. His success became visible. And people said, "It happened suddenly." But it didn't. It was built in silence. And people always noticed the outcome. Even if they ignored the journey. People notice you. In your silence. In your discipline. In your boundaries. They notice how you walk. How you react. What you tolerate. You don't need to chase attention. You need to become the kind of person attention naturally follows. Build yourself quietly. Control your emotions. Raise your standards. And one day, without forcing anything, you'll walk into a room. And everything will shift. People notice you in ways you don't realize. There was a man who used to rush everything. He walked fast. Spoke quickly. Moved like he was always late for something. And people treated him that way. They interrupted him. They overlooked him. They didn't take him seriously. One day, he slowed down. Not lazily, intentionally. He walked with control. Paused before speaking. Took his time with every movement. Nothing else changed. But suddenly, people listened. Because when you rush, you signal uncertainty. When you move with control, you signal confidence. And people noticed the difference immediately. A man used to laugh at everything. Even when things weren't funny. Even when he was being disrespected. He thought it made him likable. But it made him easy to dismiss. Then he changed. He laughed when he meant it. Stayed neutral when he didn't. His reactions became real. And people adjusted. Because when your emotions are controlled, your presence becomes solid. And people notice emotional stability. There was a man who constantly checked his phone. In conversations. In meetings. Even when someone was speaking directly to him. He thought no one cared. But they did. They felt it. Disrespect. Disinterest. Disconnection. Then one day he stopped. He gave full attention to whoever he was with. Eye contact. Stillness. Presence. And something changed. People felt valued around him. And in return, they valued him more. Because attention is rare. And people notice when you give it fully. A man used to overpromise. He would say yes to things he couldn't deliver. Deadlines he couldn't meet. Standards he couldn't maintain. At first, people believed him. But over time, trust faded. Then he made a simple rule. Say less. Deliver more. He committed only to what he could do. And then, he did it. Every time. Slowly, his reputation changed. Because people noticed consistency between words and actions. There was a man who avoided discomfort. Hard conversations. Difficult decisions. He delayed everything. But problems don't disappear when ignored. They grow. One day, he faced something he had been avoiding. Directly. Calmly. It wasn't easy. But after it was done, something shifted. He became stronger. More certain. And people noticed his change. Because facing discomfort builds a quiet kind of confidence. A man used to react instantly. Every message answered immediately. Every situation handled without pause. He thought speed was strength. But it made him careless. Then he learned to pause. Before responding, he thought. Before reacting, he assessed. That small space between action and response changed everything. His words became sharper. His decisions became better. And people started trusting his judgment. Because people noticed the man who doesn't rush decisions. There was a man who needed constant validation. He checked for approval in everything he did. He looked for reactions, praise, acknowledgement. Without it, he felt uncertain. Then he stopped seeking it. He did things because they were right, not because they were noticed. And something changed. He became steady. Unshaken by opinions. And people began to notice him more. Because when you stop chasing validation, you become someone worth validating. A man spoke negatively about others. Not loudly, but often. Small comments. Subtle criticisms. At first, people agreed. But over time, they became cautious around him. Because they realized something. If he speaks this way about others, he will speak this way about them. Then there was another man. He didn't engage in that. He either stayed silent, or spoke with respect. People trusted him more. Because people notice how you talk about those who aren't present. There was a man who gave up easily. The moment something became difficult, he stepped back. He protected his comfort. But comfort has a cost. He stayed the same. Then one day, he pushed through something hard. Not perfectly, but fully. And he didn't stop. That experience changed him. He realized he was capable of more. And people noticed his growth. Because persistence is visible, even when it's quiet. A man entered every room trying to prove something. His intelligence. His strength. His worth. But people sensed it. The need. The pressure. Then he stopped proving. He focused on being. Being prepared. Being calm. Being present. And something shifted. He didn't need to convince anyone anymore. Because his presence spoke for him. And people noticed the man who doesn't need to prove himself. There was a man who held on to everything. Past mistakes. Old grudges. Regret. It weighed on him. You could see it in his posture, his tone, his energy. Then he let go. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. He stopped carrying what no longer served him. And his presence changed. Lighter. Clearer. People noticed his peace. Because letting go creates space for strength. A man focused on what he couldn't control. Other people's opinions. Unpredictable outcomes. It drained him. Then he shifted his focus. To what he could control. His actions. His effort. His mindset. That shift made him stronger. More stable. And people noticed his calm. Because control over self is more powerful than control over anything else. There was a man who didn't keep his word. Small promises broken. Commitments forgotten. It seemed minor. But over time, it defined him. Then he changed. Every promise mattered. No matter how small. And he kept them. That consistency rebuilt trust. Because people notice reliability. A man tried to fit into every group. He adjusted his behavior, his opinions, his identity. But he never felt solid. Then he stopped adapting to everyone. He stayed the same person, everywhere. Not rigid, but real. And something changed. People began to trust him. Because consistency in identity creates clarity. And clarity attracts attention. There was a man who ignored small habits. Late arrivals. Missed details. Half-effort work. He thought they didn't matter. But they did. Because small habits become patterns. Then he changed the small things. He arrived on time. Paid attention to detail. Gave full effort. And over time, everything improved. Because people noticed the accumulation of small actions. A man didn't take care of himself. His energy was low. His focus was weak. It showed. Then he made a decision. To take care of his body, his mind, his routines. Not for others, but for himself. And the change was visible. His presence became stronger. Because how you treat yourself is how others learn to treat you. There was a man who avoided responsibility. He waited for others to lead. To decide. To act. But he remained overlooked. Then one day, he stepped forward. Took ownership. Not perfectly, but willingly. And people noticed. Because leadership begins with responsibility. A man allowed his mood to control him. Good days, he was focused. Bad days, he disappeared. People couldn't rely on him. Then he built discipline. He showed up, regardless of mood. And that changed everything. Because people noticed consistency over emotion. There was a man who compared himself to everyone. It distracted him. Made him insecure. Then he stopped. He focused only on his progress, his path. And over time, he improved. Because comparison weakens focus. And focus builds strength. People notice you. In the way you move. In the way you think. In the way you handle life when it's difficult. They notice your discipline. Your control. Your presence. You don't need to demand attention. You need to build yourself into someone who cannot be ignored. People notice the details you think don't matter. There was a man who cut corners when no one was watching. Small things. Rushed work. Half effort. He believed it was harmless. But over time it showed. In the quality of his results. In the way people trusted him. Because small actions don't stay small. Then he changed. He treated every task like it mattered. Even the ones no one would see. And slowly, everything improved. Because people noticed the difference between careless and precise. A man used to speak over others. Interrupting. Finishing sentences. Always trying to add something. He thought it made him look smart. But it made people avoid him. Then he learned to listen. Fully. Without preparing his response while others spoke. And something changed. People began to respect him more. Because listening is rare. And people notice when you actually hear them. There was a man who always needed to be right. Every disagreement became a battle. He argued, even when it didn't matter. And he won many arguments. But lost respect. Then he changed. He chose understanding over winning. He asked questions. He stayed calm. And people began to trust him. Because people noticed the man who doesn't need to win every time. A man entered conversations with an agenda. Always trying to gain something. Attention. Approval. Advantage. People felt it, even if they couldn't explain it. Then he stopped. He spoke without needing anything in return. And his presence became easier, lighter. Because people notice intention. Even when it's unspoken. There was a man who complained often. About work. About people. About life. It became his identity. And people started associating him with negativity. Then he changed. Not by ignoring problems. But by focusing on solutions. And something shifted. People began to come to him for clarity, not complaints. Because people notice where your focus stays. A man avoided eye contact. He looked away quickly. Spoke without connection. People didn't trust him fully. Then he practiced something simple. Holding eye contact. Being present. At first, it felt uncomfortable. But over time, it became natural. And people responded differently. Because eye contact shows confidence and honesty. And people notice both. There was a man who exaggerated everything. His stories. His achievements. At first it impressed people. But eventually, they saw through it. Then he changed. He spoke simply. Truthfully. Without adding more than necessary. And people began to believe him. Because honesty builds quiet credibility. A man rushed to fill silence. Every pause felt uncomfortable. So he spoke, even when he had nothing to say. Then he learned to sit with silence. To let moments breathe. And something changed. His words became more intentional. More powerful. Because silence gives meaning to what follows. And people notice that. Subscribe to Inner Steel for more content like this. And keep building a presence that speaks before you do.